I want to introduce a couple people. Several of us went to South San Francisco to see somebody called Sri Lal. Miriam Gomez, raise your hand. Rocio Valle, Joan and Ray Wheeler, my wife Barbara. What happened was the last time we were here a month ago, we had a woman come in by the name of Juan McGee, and she talked about a woman called Barossa. And she talked about Sri Lal in South San Francisco. And at the time, she didn't have the book. We have the books out here right now in the bookstore. This one is Sri Shirdi Sai, South San Francisco, but it's not cheap. And the other one is Barossa Ma by Juan McGee. And this Barossa is the one in Nepal who Baba brought back to life. So the books are for sale. They are about $20 each. So, but they're here. So if you want to get it. Again, welcome, Rita Daniele, for the reading.
The reading for today is taken from the Sanatana Saraki. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
God resides in the heart of all. Embodiments of love. Talk sweetly. Let your love flow towards all. You have love now, but it is given sparingly. At least, do not hate other people or talk ill of them. Do not feel sad when others are happy, but try to share in their happiness. Your speech has to be soft and sweet. Do not imitate the roar of the lion or the hiss of the serpent. This kind of sweet talk, motivated by love, is essential. Whatever you may do, you should always remember two things. God is truth, and death is certain. What is it then that you should always keep in your mind? Never look for the faults of others. Treat their big defects as small, and consider your own small defects as big. In order for you to follow this noble path in life, try to experience the divinity even in the small matters of daily living. In order to do this, however, there are two things which you should forget. First, you should forget the harm done to you by others. If you do not forget the harm and take it to heart, you will develop a revengeful attitude. Second, you should forget the good you have done for others. Otherwise, you will develop the expectation of a favor you need in return for those you have helped. It is necessary to forget the harm that others have done to you, and it is necessary for you to forget the good that you have done for others. It is only then that you will be able to develop the purity to experience God's grace. Sign down.
So this will be our main speaker. But first, I got two quick stories to tell. The first story goes back 5 or 6 years ago. We did a homeless feeding downtown on Wall Street. It's been going on for almost 30 years, and we have anywhere from 150 to sometimes 300 people coming down, and once every month, once every 5 weeks, we have hot food. And for me, and I've been doing this for 12 or 13 years, it's been a wonderful experience, and I love the homeless people. They're absolutely great. But one thing I've seen is when people come in to help out, sometimes people are insecure, the helpers inside of those we have, sometimes they're afraid, is it safe down here with all these homeless? And every now and then I see somebody who stands out as being, incredibly special. That was Victoria Johnson Stokes. And I told her right away that by the way that she related to these people, the kind of compassion and love that she came off with, I said to myself, here's a really fantastic, wonderful, special person. And that's the kind of thing that in my life, I remember when I meet somebody like that. And that's the first story. The second story goes back when I asked Victoria to speak. What happened was, and Bob Bazzani will be back next week. He's back. I'm not Bob Bazzani. And Bob and my wife have been talking about having a speaker come in for August. Barbara Rousseau, and Barbara Rousseau spoke, and she's absolutely wonderful. She's been going through a lot of difficulties and changes in her life, so she wasn't able to make it. And so I said, wow, what about Victoria Johnson Stokes? I think she's fantastic. And so I gave her a call. Now, this is the idea, the concept, there's no such thing as a coincidence. And I don't think Bernice Mead is here, but she's involved with a couple of things with me too. She's a real troublemaker. So anyway, I gave Victoria a call, and I said, Victoria, would you be able to come and speak in August? And she thinks about it, and she thinks about it. And she says, Bernice just talked with me a little while ago, and she said, if you get asked to speak at the Ebell Club, you have to do it. Welcome, Victoria Johnson Stokes.
I can't see all your faces, but I can feel your love. Faith Penn once said at a Psi retreat in Santa Barbara, in a church, she said, if you're not as close to God as you used to be, make no mistake about who's moved. So, when I see speakers up here and they always say a private little sweet prayer, I always wonder what they're saying, So I'm going to ask all of us right now to close our eyes. And not only to lift up our hearts, whatever we say, all day today. May our thoughts, words, and deeds be sacred and pure. Let no harm come to us, let no harm come to anyone else. Guide us and protect us. And may the rest of this day, everyone we meet, we speak with love to them. And we tell them how much we appreciate them. As if it's the last minute we get to talk to them. And that's my prayer for today. Thank you so much, dear Lord, for all you give us, especially each other. I don't know what we do without each other. Amen. This light here. Light attracts light, That's why I feel every day when I wake up in the morning to do light meditation, which we all know. Have a candle in front of us and a picture of our Lord, whatever our vision is that opens our hearts. And to let it come through our third eye, travel down our spine, open up our heart with thousands of petals like a beautiful lotus. Spread to our hands so that everything we do today will be of service to Him. To our eyes, so we'll only see the good people. To our ears, we'll only hear good people. To our mouths, we'll only speak kind, loving, thoughtful words, and only put in our mouth good food as energy as God shares it with us. And everywhere we walk, our feet will bring the ground to holy ground. This is the opportunity that we have to be devotees of God. How lucky are we to know His current manifestation? As the Bible proclaimed so many places, Revelations 19:11 said that His hair shall be tiny, thousands of tiny thorns. He shall wear a vestable, the color of blood. And He shall be surrounded by an army of men in white, and His name shall be Truth. The Sanskrit word Satya, Satya Sai Baba. We're the chosen ones, each and every one of us here in this audience. And anyone that we touch and speak, because now it's our duty to make it a better world. when I met Harold Stokes, my husband, who many of you loved and knew. We lost him a little over 6 years ago. He was my Course in Miracles teacher. And his wife was dying of cancer, and I got to know her. And she kept saying, "Take care of Harold." And I thought, no, I don't want to get married. He's not my type, I took care of my mom. I just didn't have a desire for it. But he grew on me. He was so sweet and so loving. Even though he was an attorney, he loved helping people. And he had come to India for 40 years to come to see Satya Sai Baba in India and to see the schools and the hospitals grow. I think that's his miracles. I may talk a little bit about whatever God promised me. Some of the miracles that he did in manifesting jewelry out of his hand. He said any of us could do that if our hearts are pure. But the hospitals that have around the world that are free to all, that have performed hundreds of thousands of surgeries, heart, lung, all in the cleanest condition, three that I've seen, spotlessly clean. Everyone's happy. There's a little room connected where the friends and family can stay. This is the future of hospitals, maybe. This is his mission. The schools where the children always speaks kindly and softly, and there's a waiting list to get in, from K1 through university. I remember my first trip, and I met this little 16-year-old girl, and she had gone to the school, but had to move to another area in India where there wasn't one. And we asked her, what's the difference between the public schools and the Satya Sai education and human values? And she said the first day the teacher dropped a chalk and everyone made fun of her. She said she didn't, of course. And every day after that, sometimes someone made a mistake or dropped something. And she just smiled sweetly and sent them love. After a little while, none of the children made fun of anyone. These are Swami students. That's why I loved being part of the program, what little I could do. Because someday maybe my parents, who knows. I keep feeling called to say every day is special, every day is sacred. For years I worked as a massage therapist, and I still kind of do. I have a convalescent home. I just go and spend an hour, and I love doing it. Massage the little ladies' hands and shoulders and the sweet workers there. And they teach me how to be a better person. Because I don't know, at the end of my life, when I look back, have I lived a life well lived? Baba tells us every night when we go to sleep, ask yourself 3 questions. 1, how am I a better person than I was yesterday? 2, how have I helped at least one person? And 3, how have I learned something new? Which, unfortunately, I'm usually making mistakes. I'm learning the hard way, but it's always a blessing. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I guess I could talk about Harold. When I met him, he just grew on me, and after Renee died, he just kept calling every week, and we'd have lunch and dinner and talk about Satya Sai Baba, and I thought, who is this intelligent man talking about this teacher in India, that he's come to make a difference in the world? He's come not on behalf of any religion, as he says, but to bring light and to bring purpose to our lives, and to divert a calamity that may happen, that was ready to happen. He came for us. And he said it with such faith and such conviction that I kept reading Baba's books, trying to find something wrong with it, because as a Christian, I was concerned about this. But the more I read, the more I fell in love with his teachings. And then to meet Harold's friends and to visit the Sai centers. We visited Sai centers around the world, We had a chance to go to Moscow in 2002. And Sai centers do service, as we all know, selfless service. We don't want to be thanked. We forget, as was beautiful. There they collected like 4,000 new shoes for the orphanages. They didn't have much money. The service projects that they do over there were just absolutely amazing. The Marriott took part in helping them put inside bathrooms and washer and dryers in these orphanages with thousands of children. And the first day we were at this conference with the university, Harold loved helping with these doctors and this, this program they were doing. And so we ended up going there, and I thought, oh, Sayonara, it's Thursday, there has to be a Sai Center here. And I looked next to me, and the doctor next to me out of 1,000 people has a green ring on. So I said, Sayonara, and he said, Sayonara. So for those new to Baba's teachings, I see it as the God's presence within you and me honors and salutes, and we are one. And so he said there was a Sai Center that night, and Harold started talking to him. He said, would you speak? And we looked out over this group of 350 people, so hungry to hear about God. You know, many of us have been to India. By a show of hands, how many here have been to India? Okay. So many of them couldn't afford their next meal. And here they were contributing to shoes for orphanages. It was amazing. It was inspiring. Every day I'd ask Baba for a miracle. Some days it was hard, as all of us do. We work sometimes long hours, and I was helping Harold in his law practice and working in a chiropractor's in my free time and evenings and weekends. And one lady, I used to go do massage in offices, and one lady was ready to have a baby. And I gave her a gift certificate. I said, come to the chiropractor's office when you have the baby. I'll give you a massage. And that day, she was there. And I had been very tired. My back hurt, my hands. And I said, okay, dear Lord, you work through me. You do this massage. And I asked her, how was the baby? And I said, I didn't see a wedding ring in her hand. I said, I just felt compelled. I didn't want to ask her anything personal, but I said, where's the father? Where's your husband? She said, he was very abusive. He hurt me a lot, so I had to leave Arizona. And I was coming here on the plane to John Wayne Airport, and I was praying for a miracle. I had this bag, I had to leave in the middle of the night, and I had a paper bag full of clothes, and it was just before the baby was due, and they let me on the plane. I was like 9 months pregnant, and I'm trying to struggle with my stuff to meet a friend at the airport, and the bag breaks, and she says, this funny little man behind me, and she described him, and she said he looked kind of odd. He had very curly hair and was wearing an orange-like dress, and he came up behind me, and he helped me with my things, and he spoke. She's Christian. She said he spoke in tongues, and he told me that I would have a wonderful son, and he would do great things for humanity, and to keep him in faith, and that everything would be taken care of. I had a wonderful future ahead of me. And then her friend came to meet her, and her friend loved him, from the church, and said, oh my God, what an amazing man. We wanted to speak at the church. And as they walked to their car, they turned around, and he wasn't there. They looked around and couldn't find him anywhere. She said she looked behind the cars, nowhere. By this point, I was glad she was looking down, because I was crying, because we knew who was there at the John Wayne Airport. He's everywhere. And he gave me that little sweet miracle. Another miracle, because all of us everyday miracle, we just don't always see them. One day I was listening to the radio, Christian station, and I still wasn't quite believing that Baba was who he said he was, And Lieutenant Gerald Coffey, if any of you have ever heard his story, he was in Vietnam. The happiest man to listen to this story on the radio. He was in the Hanoi Hilton. He was a prisoner of war for 8 years. He was imprisoned with a friend of his, I think Lieutenant Swanson, I can't remember, and he, unfortunately, Lieutenant Swanson didn't make it. He took his life. He couldn't take what he had to go through in that. But Gerald Coffey tapped every day in Morse code to all the other prisoners. They kept all the prisoners separate because they never wanted to know them to communicate to each other. So he would tap scripture and positive things and anything he could to keep the morale up, and unfortunately they would find out who he was sometimes and bring him out and beat him, whatever, and then put him back in his little cell, and it was 5 feet by 5 feet, and he was over 6 feet tall. No matter how bad my day is, think of Lieutenant Coffee, all of us. And his knuckles were all calloused from tapping. It never stopped him. And eventually he was released, and he ended up writing a book about this, and he ended up sharing this with people. He lived a life worth living. He said he'd go back and remember every minute of his life and redo it and retell it in his mind. Each and every one of us, like when I go do massage at hospice, people that don't believe in God, all we can do is take them back, in parts of their life to remember it. And then there's a completion for them. I had an experience I feel that I should tell. One time after my mother died, who I was very, very close to, in 1996, I couldn't stand the pain. I missed her so much. I just loved her so much. I was so close to her and I couldn't stop crying. You know how it is when you miss someone. And she came to me in a dream that night that was like a real, real dream. And I spent the day with her. She was alive. I spent the whole day with her. It was wonderful. I tried to do things she liked, go to the beach, whatever. She was still kind of despondent. I said, "What's it like on the other side, Will?" I told her, Will. She said, "It's amazing." I said, "Is Baba there?" She knew that. I said, "Baba." He said, "Oh yes, he runs this place like a tight ship." And I said, "When I cry for you, do you feel it?" And she got so sad then. And she said, "Yes." I said, "Then I won't cry for you anymore." And she looked at me like as if to say, "Thank you." And then I woke up. Well, a couple of months later, I had this episode, I guess you would say. I was in bed. My sheets wrapped around my neck. I somehow was strangled, evidently. It cut off circulation. I did come out of it, but I had an amazing experience that changed my life. I couldn't talk. I couldn't tell Harold about it because it had hurt my neck so badly. All I could do was cry because I wanted to be back there. I really believe I went to another place, another side. It was amazing. It was like being in an environment where Jello was pushing against you, Jello of love. My mother was there in the distance. She didn't want to come too close because she knew that I wouldn't want to go back. And I, all of a sudden, came back out of it. And I hurt, my whole body hurt. The human body felt so bad in it. And it like hurt, and I smelled it, and it smelled like old meat when I used to eat chicken, in the back of the fridge when I had taken a shower. It wasn't that, but compared to the heavenly realm, the earthly was so different. And all of a sudden, I just wanted to be back there with that love. And I came back, and there were people there, like Franciscan monks, and I told them, I want to stay, and they said, "You can't. You really can't." And I said, "What do I need to do?" So I wanted to meet the boss. So I had a vision. It was true. It was like all these crackling little bits of light, huge, bigger than this room. And it was love. It was the most purest love. And I woke up, I thought, why didn't I see my Jesus? Why didn't I see my Baba? But this was the love. It was incredibly love. It's hard to think about it because it was so incredible. And, I said, okay, I made a deal with them. Give me your work to do, and then you can take me when I'm 85, whatever. That's what I said, I made this deal. And then I woke up. And all of a sudden, and while I was there, I said goodbye to Harold, who was meditating. It was like early in the morning. And I saw him. I saw what he was wearing. I told him later. And I said goodbye to my little sister in New York. And I later described everything that her family and her house was doing. And I saw it all. I saw everything they were doing on the TV and what they were watching. And, I just told her she couldn't believe it. And my body looked like just lavender with bubbles. It was so pure and so light, and this love against me. The reason why I brought that up, I came back in such a state of depression for 6 months. A friend asked if I would please do massage, if I wouldn't mind, and her brother who had AIDS. I said, of course, whoever I'm asked to, it doesn't matter to me. It's a soul enwrapped in a body. You know, like Harold always said, that like our soul is like a car in the garage is the body. And this man, I told him the story, and he left his body not soon after. His sister said he couldn't thank me enough because he was so afraid of death. So I started doing massage for people in hospice and very sick, and I felt close to them. I was actually being kind of selfish. I wanted to be where they were going, you know. I felt so close to them. And I had no fear. And I started talking to students and then groups, and we worked with children abused homes and things like that, and exchange club and whatever. And I could talk to students about, you know, being careful and what AIDS does, and be smarter and honor your body. And I saw there was a purpose in everything for what I had been through. We all have a purpose, we just don't know it, you know. Anyway, back to the beginning. So, why I went to India. Harold got very sick, he almost died. He asked me if I'd please marry him. So I said yes. I thought he was going to die. And I thought, oh, if it'll make him happy. He was very sick. And then he came out of it. This was in 1994. So I knew I had to keep my promise and marry him. And I said, if I ever got married, you know, I always thought I'd go to Nice on my honeymoon. He said, no, we're going to India. I thought, oh my God, India. Oh, it's like Tijuana. Why do I want to go there on my honeymoon? You know, but he said, no, to stay together, we have to be married, and we have to go there. And so we go there on this long journey, you know, 12 hours, you know, and it's a lot driving on these huge rocks in the road, and I'm with all these women, and I sat at a table full of these lovely ladies from Iran, and they were all so lovely. And I don't know any Farsi. This one lady speaks English. She looks up and looks at me and says, you know, right now I could be in Nice, but I'd much rather be here. Why is she saying that to me? That's weird. It turned out to be Nushan Tabani, who wrote Love and Suffering. For those of you that know it, her book is in the bookstore, of course. Amazing, amazing book. In fact, that day there was a doctor I got to be friends with, and her patient she brought with her had cancer. She had a lump in her breast the size of a ping pong ball, and had just been diagnosed, and it was stage 4. And her doctor said, you have 2 choices. We can start an aggressive therapy of chemo. You know, back then it was a little bit more aggressive and a little harder on the body and a little tougher. It's not as easy as now. She said, or if you want to, you can come with me to see Satya Sai Baba and ask for healing. And she had friends, our mother knew people that knew Nushan. So she came. And these women, like we had been praying for this little girl. These ladies from Iran, I'll tell you, the suffering that they had in their country, I can't even imagine. They took on prayer like nobody's business for 3 days. These women took turns, 24 hours a day, traveling around the Ganesha statue there, you know, the removal of obstacles, praying, 24/7, just traveling around that, you know, statue and praying and praying. And sure enough, in 3 days, they got an interview, and Baba, with his loving grace, gave her one of his robes, gave her a ring, a healing ring, came out of his hand. I personally see that, or otherwise I would be standing here telling you. And more than that is the miracles that he gives us of hope and faith. He says those little rings and necklaces that he's given us are just toys and trinkets, you know. His real miracles are when he changes our hearts, when he gives us forgiveness. You know, when he grants us the ability to love our worst enemy. You know, it's easy to love the people we love. I had that one time in Harold's office. He used to hire very efficient young law clerks out of school. And one was very demanding and very aggressive, and every day I had to pray for patience with him. I would bring my massage clients that needed a divorce or bankruptcy or had civil problems, And he was so mean to them, demanding, things from them. They'd be crying in the hallway sometimes. He was an instrument. He was an instrument of God's faith. Harold would be at court, and I would tell him this. And I would tell him, one night I came home, and, Harold and we never really argued. He was too kind. I hated to hurt him, And I said, I can't take that man. I can't work with him anymore. He's so mean. He's rude to me. He says, I didn't go to law school. I shouldn't be here. I'm like, I'm trying to help your client. I was a paralegal, a lowly paralegal to him, and I would help with the typing and what I could do. And so, Harold said, I need him. He's efficient. He's a hard worker. He's amazing. So I was so mad. I said, he goes or I go. I couldn't believe I said that. So he said, I'm leaving. I'm going to sleep in the motel. And I said, no. I'll sleep on the couch. I have to pray for this. So I said the guy Tremont, the oldest prayer, 10,000 years old. It has miracles. You all know that in this room. I know that. 4 lines are very powerful. I've seen its miracles when we say it with a pure heart, English, Sanskrit, whatever. Harold used to say it going into court some days. And people that were getting divorced would ask each other out on a date that night. The opposing counsel would say, how is this happening? He said, they have children. They need to do this. They need to still be friends, at least to be friends. Anyway, so I prayed so hard, God, let me see Oliver as divine. Let me see him as pure. Anyway, that night I had a dream where I was there in the delivery room and he was being born. For some reason, his father couldn't be in the room. He's in China, and his father wasn't allowed. He was very sad on the other side of the room, and there, the baby was brought to the mother, and she held him. It was so beautiful. No matter how much we hate people, we can look at the news and say, how dare that person commit that crime or hurt those people? They were someone's baby someday. They may not have been held in a mother's arms, but our Lord holds them in arms, just like he holds us when we don't do the right thing or say or think the right thing. And there was that beautiful little baby, and I loved him so much at that moment. And I loved the way she looked at him, and she said to me, tell him that I love him and that I'm very, very proud of him. Well, the dream was over, and when I woke up, I knew what I had to do immediately, get into the office. I came into the office and the night before, 10 o'clock at night. He had asked me to leave the office so he could get his work done. He thought I was going to hit him. I came up behind him and he jumped. I would never hit him. And I said, no. I said, I have to tell you the story. And I told him the story. And this proud man, tears came out of his eyes. I said, she said, I need to hug you. And as I hugged, he broke down in my arms, and he said, my mother died when I was 10 years old. You gave me the greatest gift in the world. And he was interviewing right after that, of course, and God's grace, he knew where he needed to work. He got a job as a district attorney, prosecuting attorney in another part of the state, and he keeps in touch, and people can't understand how me and him just care for each other and always have nice things to say about each other. That's a miracle. To me, that was a miracle. The times that we can ask for a grace bigger than us to make a miracle. I don't know what else to say. On my honeymoon in India, I didn't believe that my Jesus, the avatar of this age, was back in his body. Everything that I read was what my Jesus would say, what he would say, what he would do to have hospitals, to have schools for all. This is what he would do in his mission. I was in the kitchen cutting vegetables, which was wonderful to do. There's like 7 different ways you can cut a tomato. And I learned all these things, and I heard the stories from all these ladies. Thousands of people, over 1 million when there's special festivals, come there in this little tiny village, and it's spotlessly clean, and the flowers are tended with love, and the volunteers are people that come there, as you know, a couple of weeks or months a year, that may be physicians or, engineers, whatever, and their joy is to volunteer for God. This is the new world. And as I was cutting vegetables, I would hear these stories. There was one of an Australian man. They had an interview. There were 12 in the room. Dick Selby wrote about this in one of his books. The man was very sick with cancer. He came to India. He was graced with an interview. If that was his will to get cured or better or not, then only God knows our time to leave this body or to extend it. And he looked at the wall, and Baba said, a projector came from the ceiling, and there on the wall was Australia. Swami said, "What is this? Where's this?" He said, "Australia, Swami, that's where I'm from." And it zoomed into his town. "What is this?" "That's my town, Swami." "What is this?" "That's my house." "What is this?" "It's my front door." This was one of the ladies in the interview room telling me the story. He said, "Go open it." He opened it. He walked through the door. The other 11 are sitting there thinking, what do we do? When they left the interview, they took his things, sent them home, called him immediately, His wife was very sick. It was his wife, had cancer. It was her very sick. He didn't want to leave her, and he left to come to this trip and ask for her. She left her body not soon after that. But there he was to spend his final wish, to spend with her. And when he got his luggage, his visa had been stamped and his ticket has been used. And I'm listening to this. And then another Australian lady talked about how there were 2 men on a trip many times before, in her group. Many of you may have heard this. And they had smuggled in wine. I mean, the ashram, they asked no animal products. No alcohol. We don't need that. We have divine grace. We have love. No drugs, nothing. And they smuggled in these 3 bottles of wine. At the end of their trip, they had never been to India. They just brand new to Baba's teachings, and they didn't know what to expect. And so they opened in their room this bottle of wine and poured it in these little glasses, the 3 of them, and they went, "Cheers," and they drank it, and it was water. And they opened the other bottle, and the same thing, "Cheers," and it was water. And the 3rd bottle. So immediately, they didn't know what to do. It was a miracle for them. And the next morning, they got front row. Here they are, thousands of people at time, and you're lucky to be on a line that gets up the front. You take a number for those that have been there. And you're lucky if you have, it's all orderly, like my mother says, ties a ship. And right up front, and Baba walks by them. They're so happy to see him walk by them. And just as he walks by them, he looks behind them and goes, "Cheers!" And they hadn't told anyone. They were so ashamed of it. Another story that was on that line, one of the ladies there said, well, her brother would drink beer every night, and she was so upset. Right at 5 o'clock, he'd have to drink his beer, and she just didn't like his personality when he was drunk, and she was so upset. She'd pray every night, Baba, please make him stop, make him stop. And and just to mock her, there's a picture in the kitchen of Baba. She was from England, I believe. And he'd always take his beer and go, "Cheers," to Baba. And they got an interview. And she complained to Baba, "My brother, he always drinks beer." And Baba says, very sweetly and lovingly, "Yes, but he always offers it to me first." And he says, when you do that, you offer your food to him, whatever you're eating, drinking. Needless to say, he no longer needed the beer anymore, offering it to Swami. Bear with me here. I stood on this stage with so many people, and that this Ebell club that's been around 100 years plus, and all the beautiful angels, you all know who you are, that make this happen, that rent this, that bring food afterwards, that create the flyer and the speakers, a lot of labors of love. Bring your friends, bring people here. This is a holy place on earth. Trust me, it's divine energy here, each one of you. I remember when Wilma Bronchi spoke here, and I met her in India. That was on my trip too. And she told us a story, and I thought, oh my God, here's this woman, I believe, bear with me, she was a nurse in some capacity or social worker, and I talked to her. This is an intelligent woman, and she's telling me this story. She fostered children, by the way, adults and children. She had a place in Oregon called Enchanted. Can't remember. Yes, and she had retreats every year, but she took in disabled adults, children. She actually fostered over 280 children. For those of you that have just a couple of children, can you imagine 280? Wow. She was a saint, and I loved talking to her stories. And she told me a story about when, I think it was in Vrindavan, where she was online, and there was this woman near her that had a little Indian woman from the village, and she had a baby that had died. And she had a medical background. She knew the baby had died. It had already turned blue and white. And the woman brought the baby every day to darshan. And it was horrible. In a hot Indian heat, by the third day, I hate to say this, the baby didn't smell very good. No one wanted to stand next to her, and it was horrible. But the woman prayed every day and called out to Baba. One day, the third day, Baba, Mama said, came up to the woman and put his loving hands, took the baby, and immediately the baby coughed and started crying. Mama watched this. She said, Baba said, the baby he hasn't eaten in 3 days. These are miracles that stirred my soul. The more I heard this, the more I couldn't stop crying. How are we so fortunate to know this, to see his teachings? We have scripture. All our faiths, all faiths come to Baba. It doesn't matter. When our hearts are pure, the teacher will appear. Like Yogananda said, to the students when he pushed his head underwater in the lake, and the student fought and he came up gasping for air. He says, when you truly seek to find God, like you just wanted oxygen, you can't help but find him. That's why we're here. We've prayed thousands of lifetimes, each and every one of us. And Jesus said to each of us who's given a gift, we have work to do. The other thing that I did on that first trip was Dr. Chandragupta. I had an opportunity to help type, because I thought, cutting vegetables, there's enough people to do that. I'm a typist, I can type fast, I'll type. And I went to the office and they said, only men type here, So I said, okay. And then one of the men said, Vikesari, said, there's a man, Dr. Chandragupta, and he's writing a book. It turned out to be Avaneta, The Secrets of Creation Revealed. And I can't remember the title, bear with me. Ravanesha, Advaita Ravanesha, and forgive me for that. And so I'd go and type, and it was one of those typewriters from 1940. And I'd sit there and peck at it, his notes, and I'd read these stories and read these notes of what he'd seen being up on the veranda. He was a doctor at the hospital there in town, volunteering his time. Couldn't believe these stories. And one woman, in fact, that had very bad arthritis, I saw her go by his place in a wheelchair. It was so sad to watch her. She would drop her wheelchair there and then struggle up the 4 steps it was until someone could bring her wheelchair up, and then struggle to her place. And we saw her up on the veranda one day. Baba came up to her, invited her up on the veranda, and rubbed her knees, touched her in some way, and told her to walk, and she did. And I just remembered what did I say, what Swami said to the woman whose little baby came back. He said, not one of you has her faith. And that's what he said to this woman, to everyone on the veranda. And I saw her walking, and I had seen her for weeks before in her wheelchair, and her bones all mangled and trying to, get up the stairs. And the more I saw this, I knew it. I knew that this was holy ground. Jesus had foretold that as the light comes from the east, so shall the Son of Man. And now it is our duty as each one of us to share his light. I can't think about what else to say. Harold and I got a chance to go to Colorado one time. You know how when devotees get together, we can talk for days, and the people with stories are amazing to be in that space. Al Drucker had been a professor at Swami's schools there, his universities, was telling stories. One of them was being in the interview room at the time. He came with a group of ladies. One was from Beverly Hills, and she was a little upset about being on at the time, the dirt floor in the 70s. Since then, it was, of course, all filled in with a nice floor. And a little spider came running across the floor, and Baba just grabbed it like that. And he said they were all in shock looking at that, like, how could he hurt it? And Baba said to her, "You don't like spiders?" And she said, "No, I don't like spiders." And he picked it up, and it was a brooch. It was transformed into a brooch. They said golden with rubies for eyes and crusted diamonds. And of course, she said, "I love spiders." And he said he just put it down and it scampered off. And the reason I brought that up was I was with in Anantapur, one of the women's colleges that were inaugurated, and Harold was there as well behind the stage, behind the screen, and Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister at the time, wanted to touch Baba's feet, as a sign of grace, as the disciples got a chance to wash Jesus' feet, wanted to touch it for love. And he said, he went behind the drapes, he said, the world is not yet ready to see this, to see the Prime Minister do this. And of course, as we've seen the Prime Ministers and many people from around the world, I don't have proof. I only know that people from high courts have been there and people have seen them, but I don't have that for sure. But the world is opening now. People are hearing his teachings and using his examples. And Al Drucker said he looked out. He asked Baba. He said, "Baba, you're not very tall. He's 5'4", he's my height." And he said, "Shirdi was so tall. His prior incarnation. Why aren't you tall like Shirdi?" And Baba peeked out of the drapes, and immediately all the women, of course, all got excited and smiled and cried. And he says, "I think the ladies rather like this form." It was so cute. And he said, "Baba," he said, "you're getting a little chubby." He had a little tummy there. And he said, "Not chubby." He said, "Next life." He said, "That's the problem. Too many people out there have next life waiting." I'm thinking with my head, and I should be with my heart. I remember when Martin Wagner, with the Hollywood Center, used to be the president of the Hollywood Center. You remember what Martin? He came to speak at Mission Viejo, and he said, in an interview, Baba said, "What is the difference between," he asked him, "What's the difference between heaven and hell?" And Baba very seriously said, "Heaven is when you come from your heart. Hell is from the mind." So that hit me, that hit my heart. Hal talked about living with Elsie and Walter Cowan. I've been going through all Harold's old manuscripts. This was a great gift to be able to talk, I'm not a speaker, and we're all one. So I pray that if something I say increases even one person's faith, then I haven't done it in vain. I look out at your faces, and there's so much love here. I pray that each one of you is on the stage someday, or shares your experiences, or writes them down, because each one of you have an experience to share. It's not hard being up here, it really isn't. Not with your love. In '97, when I had an opportunity to have an interview, a personal chance to be in the room with him. People pray, the multitudes that come there, we pray they'll pick, and they have to be polite and sit there and he was still in his body. And those few fortunate that he said, "Yes, come with me," got to do that. And to me, I was trying to keep quiet. We're supposed to stay in equanimity, very calm, not too excited, not depressed or sad, in a sense of groundedness, our duty. And for me, it was like I'm on the lottery. I wanted to scream inside. I can't believe it. I have all these questions to ask him. None of which, of course, I remember when I got in here. But we get inside, and the Princess of Nepal was there. You wouldn't have known it, but she was in these beautiful gold saris, and she was so sweet. And Swami whispered things to her that gave her such joy. And he even said to us, Princess of Nepal is here. It was so cute, like he was honored and proud. And that was October. In December, her brother unfortunately killed her family off, after that. And whatever he said to her, I'm sure it was a comfort to her and love. And the lady in front of me, he came up to her and he said, how is sister? And she looked at him and said, fine, Swami. And he said, Princess is studying to be a doctor. Like, one of the family explained to all of us. And he said, she's going to be a great doctor. She loves Jesus. I will make her Jesus. And he went like this with his hand, of course, like you can see in the videos and those that have seen it. Out dropped this gold medallion with a picture of Jesus, and he handed it to her, and she said it was hot. And they passed it around, and I just was in shock. I couldn't believe it. And I looked at him and I said, I looked down your sleeve, that I was right in front of you, that didn't come down your sleeve. I said, how did you do that? And he gave me this look like, don't ever doubt me. And I never want to see that look again. Anyway, and then one of the ladies that were there, he started telling her she's arguing with her husband. Do not fight with your husband. And she kept arguing with him. No, I'm not arguing with my husband. And he said things that she said in her native tongue, and then she started crying. My husband's not here, as you know, so people that here have a spouse, tonight treat him like it's your first date. Do that. Do that for God. Honor them, because someday they might not be there. No matter what they do, I know sometimes it's not easy. People in our lives, they test us. I was at a memorial last week. Say to people, we could start with the food afterwards, the little treats that people so lovingly bring. Tell each person you meet them your eulogy, what you're going to say to them. Because people are in demand for that. Don't wait till they leave their body. Anyway, and the other woman that was there, I know her personally. She had health problems, and he looked at her very sternly also, and he said, why worry? I am here. Why fear? Why I'm here? He kept telling her, he says, you worry, worry, worry all the time. And then he went through this, and I won't be personal, but all her surgeries. And I knew her. I knew her medical history. He went through each one in order of each of her surgeries. I listened to that, and he said, see what it does, and I thought, why do we need to worry? Who cares? A little old man said to me one time, I was visiting a pier early in the morning when I used to go out running, and he said, you have 10 problems, and a year from now, 7 will solve themselves by themselves. What does it matter, So after he yelled at these two women, and then he looked at me, and I thought, if he screams at me, I'll just die right here. I'll leave my body. I can't live it, And he looked at me so lovingly, so sweetly. Like that flyer, the picture of me looking at him. The reason why I gave that out is because if you look at his face, that's the way God looks at each and every one of us all the time. Every single minute. We just don't see it. So look at that picture. Look at a loving picture of him and know that that's how he's always looking at us. So he very sweetly said to me, where's husband? And that was 97. Harold, I knew, would be upset when he saw. I waved on the veranda for him to come join us, spouses join us, and he was way around the corner. He was actually getting Padnamaskar around the corner from Baba, and he couldn't see me. So he said, he's out there, Swami, he's going to be very upset. He's going to be very sad. And he goes, I know. He smiled. Harold had many interviews before in the early days. Harold said he used to open Swami's mail there in the room with him, and Swami would tell him what the letters were saying as he opened them. Before then I didn't believe it, but now I did. And Baba said, bring him to me. And I didn't know what that meant. But when times were tough and Harold would take on cases in the law office, it didn't matter if people had money, it didn't matter what they did. You know, he'd help them. He didn't believe in divorce or bankruptcy, so let's get them back together, let's renegotiate their debts. You know, Harold's memorial was amazing. People came to me and said they had children because Harold got them back together, you know. All of us have work to do. We don't know what jobs we have. That's our job. That's our job. Do the best we can. As if it's tomorrow, you know, dance like no one's watching. And Baba knew what I did for a living. He talked about things, just very personal things. I got to touch his feet. He smelled, his whole body smelled like the vibhuti, the sweet, sweet jasmine. You know, in India they touch feet. And, you know, before I went into that interview, I said, you know, I see people touching his feet. I'm not touching his feet. He's barefoot, you know. But he doesn't wear shoes. There's no way I'm touching his feet. First time I got a chance to, I just wanted to touch those feet. And they're like warm ice cream. They were just so soft and so beautiful. And I like lost consciousness at that minute. I don't remember. And I got, all of a sudden, the fever came, and the fever got worse and worse and worse. I could barely walk out of the interview. I couldn't stop burning up. I couldn't walk. I was really sick. I started getting sick. Out of nowhere, this little lady, she had to be 90 pounds somehow, lifted me up and got me to my door and back into my room. You know, that was a time of Diwali. Is that how you pronounce it, Diwali? I've heard Diwali, the Festival of Lights. And in it, I got to see my first one, was to see the light in the world. You know, the Indian traditions are so sacred. Each faith has their sacred ones. To clean our house to get ready for God to come. To wear, if they can afford it, a new piece of clothing. To be ready for God, to welcome into our home. To see the light in everyone. They have lights everywhere. It's so beautiful. I got to watch Baba on the veranda in the Pune Chandra. It was incredible. It was hot and sweaty, and just the day before, I watched him on the veranda, flinging his wrist into the fires. The priests were saying Vedic chants. It was so beautiful. And I asked the woman, I didn't know anyone around me, I asked her next to me, this darling older woman who was praying the whole time. I said, what is he doing? She goes, those are jewels. You could see them, different colors. I could watch them. I go, where are they coming from? How are they coming out of his hand? And she explained what Deepavali is, you know, to throw or what Baba was doing, throwing our bad thoughts, bad words, bad deeds, anything we'd ever done in our life, throw them to the fire. Anytime you see a candle light, throw them to the fire, beg for God's forgiveness. Ask for that to purify our hearts. You know, the Buddha ash, you know, pray for that light in you. So I prayed so hard, and I thought of all the things in my life and bad things I thought or did, and, you know, since I was a child, you know, all things you do, you know, disrespect your parents or take off school or something, all the mean things. And I thought, oh my God, and I just was so humbled and shamed. And, well, I got it. You know, I got the fever. I got so sick for 5 days, I couldn't leave the room. I kept getting sick. The only thing I could keep down was water with a little of Baba's healing vibhuti. That's all I could do. And it purified me. Harold said he couldn't touch my forehead. I was burning up with fever. My temperature was beyond the temperature when they finally sent a doctor. And after the fever, I think it was the 4th day, the fever started subsiding with Ayurvedic medicine. But I couldn't take a shower. It was like needles on my back. It was horrible. Harold said that even the electrical, his shaver didn't work, his radio didn't work, nothing, you know. But, you know, that's the magic of that pure heart begging for his forgiveness, that we all have that ability. We don't have to be in India. We can do that right now, right this minute, every time we see a thing. And to pray for the world. So that was my 97 interview. In 99, I worked with the children's play. It was a beautiful, tell me if I'm talking too much. Okay. You'll tell me, right? You'll give me 5 minutes. Okay, so in 1999, Harold always said you have to go to India for Christmas. He said it's amazing, the whole mountain of people holding candles, singing, you know, the Christmas song, "The Lord Has Come." as the dawn slowly comes up and everyone's singing. I used to do that. And to be there and to see him come out in the veranda. So we worked on a Christmas play. This is a little 99, a little village in India. It's much more high-tech now. We didn't have the ability for computers or anything. We had to get costumes together, and we had 10 days to do it, and people submitted scripts. This one was about the Wizard of Oz and how Dorothy is with Jesus to come meet God, and all the lessons learned. It is quite a very spiritual story when you look at it like that. Carolyn Miss M-I-S-S Mace in her book talked about the spiritual reason for the Wizard of Oz, just like that. And so miracles just kept happening in it. That somehow we would have a surprise, and we'd have the people to paint the background, and the children were little tiny children, some of them 5 years old, and adults got to say the voices, so the children, and pre-record that they would do it on microphone, so the children would act them out. And during the rehearsals, a couple of times, all of a sudden the big shed doors would come down, and we knew Baba was coming. And he would come in so sweetly, the way he taught. This is the adults all working and preparing. And he was so sweet. And he'd ask, the children one time were there, and he'd say, who's playing Matthew? And we'd go, Matthew, the tax collector. And he started telling people stories in the Bible, the day Jesus was born. For me as a Christian, who always wanted to be living in the time of Jesus, he gave me that little baby wish. One woman he said, who is Joseph? Joseph and Maria, Joseph and Mary. He said, the day Jesus was born, Joseph wore a red vest. And the next time that he came through, this woman had been waiting. She went into town and bought 3 different colors. Red has all those different colors. It could look like purple and orange. She bought 3 different kinds. She brought in this little bag. She was so excited. And she showed Baba, and he reaches into the bag and pulls out a 4th color. She said she didn't buy that color. This was the color that day. But we had all these little sweet, sweet things. And after the play was over, he called Sylvia Talbot, who was a director of the play. He also did the Beastmasters, which that show from 15 years ago where they had the tiger in it. And that always had a kind lesson. The villain was never killed. He was always transformed to good. And he was our director. And Baba looked at the man, and we were in the second line in the interview room, and he waved his hand like this. And I watched it. I was underneath it like this, and it looked like Vaseline on his hand, and this little green ring pops out. I go, oh my God, I saw it. And he gives it to the first man, and the man can't fit it on his hand, and Baba says, doesn't fit, And pulled it out. The man was so sad. I think his hand was almost bleeding, trying to get it back off. And he lifted it up right in front of me. I've always tested him for miracles. I was testing my shoe. And he blew on it, and he went, each time it got bigger. And then he put it back on the man's hand, gave it to him. It was Sylvia Talbot. And it slipped on his finger, perfectly. And he looked at us, and someone asked, what about the future of the world, Baba? What's going on? And Baba said, I haven't thought about this since 99. It's too much pain. Too much sorrow. Not enough love. He said, he held the world like in the palm of his hands, which he does. He said, we need more love. He said, there'll be many sunspots. He said, many challenges. He said, don't worry, I'm here. We see all these challenges on the news, and Revelations talked about it, All the holy books talked about it. There's many books, Buddhist, the American Indian, the Great White One will come, the Messiah, there's many books, written about this. We have them in the bookstore. And this is the time. This is the blessed time that we had this opportunity to be here. We don't realize that everyone looking at us is looking at the Lord. Every time someone races beside us, on the freeway, and we want to curse them out, how dare they? I always think they could be racing to the hospital because someone could be in an ambulance. They're chasing. Harold had 3 strokes in 3 years, and I chased ambulances, to get there. So we don't know, or there could be someone that would have saved our mother in a car accident, at the side of the road. We don't know what the worst stranger in the world, could do. And that's when Bob was there. What else? And again, Harold didn't make that interview. Oh, I felt so bad. He was outside there, but he let a lady in a wheelchair instead in front of him, and so there was no more room. They closed the door. We were squeezed in like sardines, and eventually somehow we didn't. It just kind of expanded, as it does, and we were able to be there and be part of that. There were women from the Education Human Values, our dear Bernice Mead. Her son, had that accident in '94, and her book is beautiful, and he's still on life support, but he's been able to touch others through that lady that speaks and wrote books about things that she says come to him that only Bernice and Rod could know. Bernice is still traveling around the world, on her own, just helping people, setting up schools and teaching teachers. She never runs out of energy. I aspire to be like her and to never stop laughing as she does. Harold and I started getting to be asked to speak about India in the outside sector. We were asked to speak at the Inside Edge, it's called. I'm sure it's still there on Wednesday mornings at UCI. It's the people that, like the author that wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, and very business people, but high thinking, very spiritually minded. And so Harold and I prepared a speech, and we went back and forth. What we're going to talk about? I go, Harold, don't talk about the ring being manifested. It's a little bit too much for people, Just talk about, the schools and the miracles in our hearts and things like that. The first minute in front of the microphone, it goes, and this ring was manifested by him. I'm like, oh my God, that's Harold. More people asked about the ring and asked about Baba, and eventually came to know his teachings through that. Who knows what we're going to say, Even in his office, when people came with their children and they're like, Baba, what do I do? My son stole things from the store, or he was on drugs, or, and he's, what do we do? He doesn't believe in God. And Harold would look at him and say, then I can't help you. He said, if you don't believe in God, you better start. We're like, oh my God. And, that's what we have to do. He had that faith. People would see his picture on the desk and say, that's God. And we'd go, okay. And his staff got used to that. The little gray vibhuti, when people had an emergency or we had intense people in the office, even the law clerk I told you before about, it was, give me some of that gray powder I can't handle today. We had a bookkeeper that had a huge blister on her calf that was, oh my God, it took up her whole calf. It was a burn. And she couldn't walk from the pain one day. And I said, do you believe in God? And she said, of course I do. And I took out the little packet of powder, which we have here, of course, always. And I put it with my finger across in a line, and it immediately healed flat. She couldn't believe it. I put it across the whole thing, and it immediately healed flat. For those of you that know Rupa Sharma, that of course inspired and spearheaded these incredible free medical camps 3 times a year all over. I remember 10 years ago when we worked with a little boys' home, and the woman there at the boys' home, we were taking them out for the day at the park, and she had a headache when I got there, and she said the frisbee, one of the boys by mistake hit her in the head, and it was so hurting her. And she said she asked Rupa if she had aspirin. Rupa said, I don't need aspirin. My husband's a doctor, but we don't use it. Do you believe in God? And she said, yes, of course. She said, put this to your forehead. She said, Victoria, was amazing. The pain went away immediately. And I told Rupa, and Rupa said, of course. And you'd have to ask Rupa the whole story about when the taxi she was in racing in Bangalore and Mahatma Gandhi Drive was going so fast to make the airport. it ran into a woman and knocked into her, and she was knocked unconscious. Her husband, Ashok, was a doctor, put the woman in the back seat she was bleeding from the gash of her forehead, put her in the back seat of the taxi, and blood was just pouring out. Both Rupa and Ashok had told me about this. And it had been, 10 minutes. Ashok said after 4 minutes there's going to be brain damage. And they kept praying and saying, Sai Ram, and all of a sudden Rupa remembered the dream she had the night before. Baba said, don't forget my vibhuti. So she took vibhuti out of her pocket. She thought, why didn't I think of that? It had to happen this way. She put vibhuti in her water bottle, put it on the gash. Immediately, the woman's eyes opened. Even the cab driver who didn't believe in Baba yelled, oh, Sai Ram! And they got her to the hospital. By the time they got to the hospital, it stopped bleeding. The gash had healed over. My patron saint, we got married on her birthday. We opened the Sai Center on her birthday. And she always said, love till it hurts. And when she went, she stopped at the border going into a communist country back in the 80s. And I'm sure you guys have heard this story, but I just love this. They asked her if she had any weapons to declare, and she said, yes, my Bible. And that's what we have. Baba says, I will protect you as your eyelids protect the eyes. Do your duty with unwavering love. Be happy. Know that everything is for a reason. You all have sacred souls, and you all have parts to play in the sacred mission that is unfolding. You know, many of you have lost someone, as I did, as every one of you has or will. Ask for a miracle. Ask for the pain to go away, like my mother's dream. When we cry for them and learn pain over them, we bring them back to this realm. We don't let them finish their path. That I know. I know that. That picture, I was asking Baba, thanking him. All I wanted to know was how is Harold. That picture was taken 3 years after his transition. And the ladies from the Christmas play that year pushed me up to the front